It's time to get clear, get heard, and get paid. And join us on our Soul Business Retreat. Attract your dream clients and income over 3 nights as we shape your passion into a business that makes a profit. Follow our 13 steps to reach 5K in 30 days in the beautiful Byron Bay. Whether you're starting, growing, or expanding your business, our all-inclusive 3-night retreat is the place for you. Check out the details in the show notes, and we hope to see you soon. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and I'm here today with the beautiful Juia. Rajagopalan, I got it, is a writer and instructional designer whose short fiction has appeared in several anthologies and online magazines, and her upcoming workbook, The Healthy Witch's Wellness Grimoire, will be published in 2025. She's a certified nutrition coach and a 400-hour Vinyasa and Yin Yoga teacher. She lives just outside of Detroit, Michigan with her husband and their grumpy dog, and currently in the cold, so a big welcome to the show, Juia.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Now, there's so much we can talk about. We should have started recording before we put the show on, but but that happens. So I guess the first thing I wanted to unpack with you, which is what's an instructional designer?
Yeah, you know what? You're not the first person to ask me that. My mother asks me like periodically, what is it that you do? So, an instructional designer is someone who I like to say is a teacher for adults. Okay, so I take the knowledge from wonderful people in all sorts of different walks of life and I translate it into training videos and training tools. If you've ever started a new job and you had to like walk through like an orientation video where you click through and answer some quiz questions and things like that. So, someone like me created that. And
Very cool.
I'll be honest, I know nothing. So I don't have the knowledge, but I work with people called subject matter experts and they have all the knowledge. So I interview them, I talk to them, I write down all of their wonderful knowledge, and then I create trainings for them.
That's so cool. And I just realized why we've been introduced. I will talk to you more after the show. I love the universe. Thank you. And I'll leave that as curiosity for people listening. And I guess the other thing we were talking about is the Healthy Witch Grimoire. I said that right, didn't I? What is this about? Tell me.
Yeah, it's so cool. So in one of my roles as an instructional designer, I worked for a company that provided nutrition coaching and fitness coaching for like lots of different clients, people trying to get healthier, people trying to lose weight, stuff like that. And then I became a certified nutrition coach. So I went through and did all the certifications and learned a ton. And when I was studying the interactions with the coaches and with the clients, I learned that, it wasn't really that people didn't know like what they're supposed to be doing to get healthy. Like the internet's out there now, like we can see that like we're supposed to be eating less sugar and more protein, lean proteins. We know we're supposed to be drinking water, right? And, we're supposed to be moving more and exercising more, but we don't do it. And I don't always do it. I'll be totally honest. I make unhealthy choices all the time. I love Taco Bell. I don't know if you guys have Taco Bell, but I love yeah. And I love it. It's fast food. It's not the best for you. But
Yeah, they tried to start it and I don't think it took off. I think there was only, I don't know if there's still franchises, but I know exactly what if anyone doesn't know what Taco Bell is, they've just got a lot of unhealthy Mexican food, really.
correct. That is correct. Yeah, it's not the best health choice, but I love it anyway. So, so I was really interested in like why we make the decisions, we make like health wise and in a variety of different things, like that make us less happy, And so I like there are a variety of things that we do. And, I have been what I would say is a practicing witch for many years. I just didn't know what to call myself. I was doing spell jars and fire rituals and, I've been reading tarot for 20 years, And so I had all this background. And what I realized when I was studying, habit formation and making healthy choices was it's all about intention. It's all about motivation. It's all about, what's going on in here and in here. Oh, you can't see me. I'm pointing to my head and my heart. It's all going on in there, rather than like a big knowledge gap, and I realized when I do spell work, when I do fire rituals, and when I create spell jars, the first thing I do is I set an intention for what I want to do with the spell work, right? And I realized that that is so connected to what we're doing with our healthy choices. It's so connected to how we're like living our lives. And I really wanted to take that intention, manifestation, motivation, and bring it into the realm of wellness, because I think they're so connected. Or if they're not in our lives, they probably should be, because we need to make sure that we understand why we're doing the things we do. We need to be aware of our habits. We need to be aware and intentional about how we act within the world. And for me, that's based on witchcraft, that, and I think there are a lot of people in my community, in the spiritual community in general, who could relate to that, and maybe haven't always felt welcome in that health and fitness world. Like, I'm not going to go to the gym and lift a bunch of weights or throw a tire around, like that's just, I don't feel welcome there.
I can tell everybody right now that is not Julia.
No, no, dude. So I want to, bring our two communities together in intention building and manifestation and motivate, and use all of those words in a really practical way, and use our rituals and things like that to help everyone feel welcome in the world of wellness.
I love that. I love that you're using witchcraft per se to bridge the gap. And it's so funny because witchcraft is. Have we had a witch on? I'm not sure if we've had a. I have no, we've had a witch on. I don't know if we talked about witchcraft, but it's so funny because we all have these big witch wounds that we've been carrying through, and I personally had to go through a lot of that healing that witch wound, but we're finally in a place where it's not as dangerous, I want to say, to actually talk about this stuff, and it's not as woo, because science is starting to catch up with the metaphysical. Like we've got all this amazing stuff coming out of the Heart Math Institute. We've got Dr. Joe Dispenza leading the way. We've got so many things to start to back up what we've just been saying and feeling for years. And especially like grounding, but like you were saying with the intention and the manifestation, if anyone's curious, look up the Emoto water experiment and you will start to understand the power of your words and how that can really infiltrate, because we're 80% water, but in that plasma state, and it so influences those words and those impressions that come through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took me a while to call myself a witch. It took me a while, and once I finally did, I felt so free and so powerful. Like, I'm going to get a little emotional because it was so fascinating. I was doing all these things, and I think a lot of people do all of like things like this, and they're still sort of hesitant to call themselves a witch, and I agree with you because, well, not so long ago, you get burned at the stake for being a witch. You know what I mean? And even growing up, I was born into a very religious, Christian community. And that was not, witchcraft was evil, right? And being able to finally say, like, oh, yeah, that's what I am, and be able to put a label on it and take it back for myself and say, like, yes, that's what I am, and I'm proud of it, was such a powerful place to be, and a freeing place to be. And what I think I love about the witchy community is that it's such a unique practice for every person. as wellness should be. Wellness should not be the same for every person because every person is different. Every situation is different. Our lives are all different. So, of course, these things should be, our spiritual practices should be unique, and our wellness practices should be unique to our situation and our, souls. So, yeah, it was such a wonderful thing to be able to say it.
It's so funny because I went that with the term psychic. So I got, I was so conditioned not to say I was psychic. And for ages, I thought psychic meant seer, and I never claimed to be a seer. But psychic just means you can sense things outside your common sense, like your senses, like taste, taste, in this realm. And I was like, and someone asked me one day, they're like, "Are you psychic?" I'm like, yes, I am. And it, like you said, it felt so powerful to own that label. And I don't like labels, but sometimes you have to make peace with the fear around that label in order to move forward so that you can really embrace your power, I feel.
Mhm. Well, I believe there's power in words and there's power in language, and to me, I think like, labels, you're right, it can constrict you, but I think it can also free you. So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. Oh, goosebumps. So, um, so let's backtrack a little bit. So you've been doing tarot for 20 years. Tell people a little bit about what tarot is, maybe the pitfalls, because I know some tarot readers get a bad name and a bad rap. So I guess, if you want to compare to kind of how you do it I feel like you're a very integral person and, how if someone's finding a tarot reader, even what comes from that to know if they're legit or just pretending to read the cards, I guess. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tarot is such a fascinating thing. So, tarot cards, well, they can be different, but typically there are, the major arcana and the minor arcana. And when we have the major arcana, there are pictures of like characters or archetypes, we say, right? And the theory is that these cards are following us through our life journey. So it starts off with a fool when you're new and kind of a fool, and then it moves throughout the progression of a person's life. So you've got these cards, and then you've got cards that are different suits, for lack of a better word, and they tell us a whole variety of clues about, the physical and I would say like the spiritual world, right? And there are a lot of people who say that they can like see what's going to happen in the future. And I'll be honest with you, I've had some really surprising and, I mean, like spine tingling moments where I had no idea something was going to happen. And I just said, this is what I see in the cards. And, each of the cards has a meaning, but we also bring our own intuition to reading these cards. And so, I think it's a combination of both. But I've had some experiences where I've said, "Hey, I had no idea. Just met the person." I said, "Hey, I see this," and they've gotten so surprised. Like I had one experience where I had been drinking a little. And this is what we don't want to do. We do not want to drink and read cards. So that's not a great thing to do. But I was doing it, and I was talking to this kid I just met, and I was like, "Hey, I see, is there a new baby in your life? I feel like there's like a child that's going to be born. This is going to, really new." And I never met this kid, no idea. And he's like, "Yeah, why?" I'm like, "Oh, is there an issue with it? You need to go to the doctor, get them checked out. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like there's an issue with it." And he got up, he got so upset. He's like, "I don't know, like, he's like, my sister just told us she's pregnant." And I'm like, "Oh, congratulations, that's so wonderful." He's like, "She's 16." And the family is in an uproar and everyone's upset. And I was like, "Oh, well, that's what the cards told me," And I had no idea. I'd literally never spoken to this kid. And so there are certain situations where I'm like, I cannot explain that. I cannot explain that in the universe. Um, but then what I really like about tarot also is there's the unexplainable. And then there is something that I think taps into something that is so much deeper within ourselves. So there have been some psychologists and psychiatrists who have studied, archetypes and tarot, and how that we can use them to read and understand what's going on internally with us. Because I firmly believe, like, we get so much information in the course of the day, like thousands of pieces of information as we're walking through the world, and we cannot possibly keep it all in our conscious mind, right? It's just too much information, but it's in there deep, deep inside, right? And sometimes we see signs or hints that tell us a certain direction, right? you know um and we don't always pull that to our conscious mind. So I think what we can do is use the tarot as a tool to take what's in our subconscious, essentially what we already know, and bring it to the conscious, right? So, like, sometimes I'll get someone who's like, oh, should I stay with this guy? Should I leave him? And really deep down, they know, I think, most of the time, like they're like, oh, yeah, he takes 3 days to text me back. Oh, yeah, like he doesn't, he just doesn't maybe treat me quite right. And there are all these like teeny tiny little hints that are going on in their subconscious, but they really need to sit down, maybe use the tarot to help bring those subconscious, pieces of information to the conscious, and then make a decision based on that. So I think the tarot is such a good introspective tool. I use it all the time on myself, and I haven't been doing readings lately for the general public, but I do them for myself all the time. And they really help me like find my path and process all of the massive quantities of information that's coming in. And I think anyone can do that. So like, in my little grimoire, I have all of these tarot spreads. So what a spread is when you lay down the cards, you've probably seen it in a movie if you're not familiar with the tarot reading, but when you lay down the cards, you do it in a particular order. And there are some really traditional orders. The most basic one is like a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. Yeah. But you can also do them in lots of different orders, right? And so what I have is I have a spot with one question or a spot with another, and then we call that a spread. And it's just the way you've laid down the cards. And it can answer specific, pieces of, information or questions or things like that, or represent people or things sometimes. But I have lots of really cool tarot spreads in my grimoire that help people process different types of information about their wellness, about their mindset, about themselves, their intuition, things like that. So I think for me, bringing tarot into your wellness practice is actually a really fun thing, and it's really powerful as a tool for introspection. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying before we started that I actually use oracle cards in a similar way, and that I channel.
Explain what oracle cards are?
Yeah, so oracle cards, I guess they're more direct messages where there's not as much to interpret through, whereas tarot, there's, you look at what direction the card is, whereas an oracle card will just say, yes. Some of them will just say yes, or some of them will just say, reconsider, or, there's different ones that will have practices and rituals attached to it so that you might do some healing for yourself or whatever it might be. But the thing about oracle cards is it's usually the imagery which inspires you and reflects back what you need to know. And it's similar to tarot because you have obviously signs attached to different things. But with the oracle cards, and I have so many different decks because it's just whatever I get pulled to. Yeah, I know. My husband's like, did you need that one? I said, it whispered to me, Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But but and I liked what you said too about it's like you're not claiming to predict the future, because we're not. We're just giving insight into what's happening in your subconscious. And this is the caveat too. You can make a choice as soon as you leave that room, based on the information you've got, and you've completely changed your trajectory because, our timelines aren't fixed and, we can move forward any way that we want. So I love that you said that and brought that up too, because it's a very important thing because people will often go, oh, but they said this would happen if I did this. And it's like, well, did you choose to do that or you didn't choose to do that? It's not set in stone. If you didn't do that, then nothing's going to happen. And at the same time, some people will sit around and wait for that information to come through where the universe is giving them so much stuff and they've forgotten to actually look for that because they just think it's going to happen. But you have to be an active participant in your life. Otherwise, nothing's going to change.
I agree with you 100%. So like I said, I do lots of witchy rituals. And one of my favorites, I don't know if you do this one, is on the first of the month, you stand outside your door and you bring ground cinnamon, okay? And you sprinkle the cinnamon into your hand and then you blow the cinnamon into your open door, and it's designed to bring prosperity and like financial success into your house. Yeah, so you do it like the first of the month. Typically we do this ritual, and you can usually do it like you could say a little incantation. Like I like the one that's like, hey, I invite prosperity to enter this house, invite success to enter this home, something like that. And I have something actually on my Instagram that is a nice little incantation that you can do, you know and what I always suggest is if you do that ritual, also write down one active thing that you're going to do to bring financial success into your home. Yeah. And so for me, it'll be like, okay, I'm not going to eat out so much. I'm going to cook at home and save some money that way, because I think there's an immense amount of power in our words and setting intention and just putting it out to the universe. Like, hey, I want this. There's so much power in that. But there's also a lot of power in setting an active goal and following it. So I think they have to be combined together. That's where the true power lies.
Well, I feel too like if you don't move, the universe won't move with you. Like it's all good you speaking the words, but if you're not then carrying out that action, it's like that thing like you can talk the talk and not walk the walk. You have to talk and walk, talk the talk and walk the talk, and it's so important that you actually anchor it in what you're doing. Otherwise, things don't change, things won't shift because you're not actually taking an active role again in your life.
No, you're 100% right. And that's why I think what I really liked or what I really like about creating this grimoire is like I try to combine, my witchy rituals and intention setting with some really practical things. Like we were talking before about spell jars, and I'm showing this to you. They can't see it, but it's this little jar that I got from the Dollar Tree, the dollar store here. And then I filled it with different herbs, that help build intention. So this one's about, health. And I have different recipes also on my website, and I put usually like I write like something down of what I want, like I want, greater health, and I put it in there. And then I seal it with some wax and I take it with me. And so this one I actually keep in my car. And it's to remind myself when I'm outside to make healthy choices, to not go through that drive through, right? Like to bring a bottle of water with me so I don't buy some soda or something, and I think there's power in this spell. There's power in this, building this out and setting my intention. But also, I keep this right in my car. And if we're doing habit formation, and we have the science of habit formation, Atomic Habits is a fabulous book for that. But we call that an environmental cue. So we have these cues in our environment that trigger our habits. Right, it's essentially a reminder, right? Like a reminder what we're doing. And so to me, this you could call it an environmental cue to make myself make healthy choices when I'm in my car. So I think I like to combine the practical with the spiritual, with the witchy, and make it a really cool place for our community to be.
And I do a similar thing with the environmental cue. I put post-it notes with my intentions. Like, in the car where you have the RPM, if you're not driving a manual, it doesn't matter. You don't need to look at it. So I just stick the intention over the top. And then I also do the same thing with crystals. So I love crystals, but I'll wear different crystals to remind me. Like today I've got a rose quartz to remind me to come back to my heart, and in my car I've got this kind of bracelet and a charm with an owl and a crystal hanging off it. And I hold it when I feel unsafe to remind me to call in, people in the universe and my guides and my spirit team and whoever it might be. But it's almost that intention and that, like you said, that reminder that you do have that support, that you do have the opportunity to do that. And our subconscious mind is looking for feedback to justify how it's feeling or what's happening. And I feel exactly that's what those environmental cues do. Because when you see your little spell jar, you'd be like, no, that's right, we're making healthy choices. Okay, thank you. And then when I see my little thing in the car, yes, I'm safe driving in this car. Doesn't matter what's going around me, I'm safe in this car. So it's those subconscious cues to let our subconscious know that we're safe as well, so we can actually keep moving and doing what we need to do on our journey.
Yeah, and what I love is I feel like a lot of this is ancient wisdom
Yeah.
that people had for a very, very long time. They just didn't necessarily have the words like subconscious and conscious mind, and they didn't have the understanding of, nerve endings and psychology. They didn't have like all of the words around it. But I think that a lot of this knowledge has been around for a very long time, and it's been tried and tested. And that's what I think is so cool, is like we're sort of combining the modern with the ancient and finding a way for it to live in our lives and in our hearts in a very practical and hopeful way. So yeah, I'm totally with you. I love it.
I love that. So how did yoga fall into all of this?
Yeah. So when I was graduating from college, I started having some panic attacks. I went to the hospital once because I thought I was like having a heart attack or something. And I was so anxious, big life change, graduating from college. And when I started, talking to people, I realized another thing. I did not know how to breathe properly, which sounds insane. Like you breathe like from birth, right? But the reality was I was breathing like I was all hunched over, and I was like breathing from my chest. And then I was like adding to my panic. And so I started doing yoga to help me calm down, help me get healthy, and to help me learn how to breathe. The wonderful belly breaths of yoga, the deep breathing. And I just fell in love with it. And so I've been practicing yoga for, again, like another 20 years. And I actually moved to India with my husband. He got assigned there for work. He's originally from there, but he got assigned there for work. And so I went with him and I studied yoga in India. So I studied vinyasa, amazing. Like I did yoga like on the Ganges River, in ashrams. It was so cool. And I studied vinyasa yoga, which is like one breath, one movement, right? So it's very fast. And then I also studied yin yoga, where you hold poses for, I know I love yin yoga too, where you hold poses for like, several minutes at a time. And I like that I studied both of them because to me, they really go hand in hand with each other. And I find that their yoga is so powerful. The other thing too is, so I'm 3 years sober and I used to have a drinking problem, and the pandemic made it very clear it was a problem, And so what getting sober really helped me understand that I need to make different choices. And so I'm also certified in something called Y12SR, which is yoga of the 12-step recovery. And so, yeah, it's so cool. And they're free online meetings that they have them every single day, and they help people similar to like AA. They help people like sort of talk through some of the issues they're dealing with in recovery, and then they do a yoga practice like along with it, because I believe that in my addiction, I had a problem with like being in my body, being where I am, being in the present moment. And yoga has really helped me reconnect with my breathing, my body, and like my mindfulness of being where I'm at. And I think it's such a powerful tool for not just people in recovery, but people trying to make health choices, that or change health changes, I suppose. And then also just people trying to be more mindful and happy. And I think yoga is so powerful for that.
Yeah, and the thing I love about yoga is that it brings you back into your body really quickly because you have to be so aware of where you are in the space so that you can actually do the moves. And the reason I like the yin yoga, right? I'm saying that right. Yeah. I'm like, I'm not making that up. The reason I like the yin yoga so much is because it opens up the emotional senses too. And sometimes you'll just be, yeah, just doing that one where you lay down and you stretch out and you open all your kidneys, and then just all this fear and grief and all these things because you're opening up your lung meridians and your kidney meridians, and all of a sudden you're just like having this massive emotional release, and you're like, I was just laying in a position, I don't know how I got there. But at the same time, once you start to understand the mechanics behind that, yoga is such a powerful tool. And it doesn't have to be complex. Like I have a shoulder injury, so I can't do all the fancy things, but I can still do things so I do every day, I do the tree pose because I find it grounds me really quickly and it helps with my balance and it just brings me back into my body like that. So, and all I did was start doing it each morning. And I think I started, I want to say November, December. And now I can just stand anywhere and stand in this one-legged position. And then it inspired my son. So now my son's wanting to do it and see if he can do it. And it's just, but it was purely the intention to connect back with my body and be grounded in that spot. And I think that's what a lot of people will go, oh, yoga's not for me. But it can be for anybody. And like you said, there's so many different types of yoga. If you want more the fast-paced one, then you can do the vinyasa. And if you want the slower one, then you can do the yin. But even you can go to places that do both together. You might start with one and finish with another, and that's perfectly okay too.
Yeah, and what I loved about being in India is people bring yoga into their everyday lives. So you'll see a granny who's like going for a walk in the park, and she'll be walking around, and then she will stop and do a few minutes of yoga. Maybe it's, standing in a tree pose or just doing a little like mini sun salutation. A sun salutation is where you sort of move from your
Hands up and
arms
out.
upright,
Yeah.
raised to the sky, and then down and sort of around and back up. It's like a really slow moving burpee, if you're familiar with that. You know what I mean? But like maybe the granny won't do like the full, on the ground pose, but maybe she'll do like a little part of it and she'll do that for a few minutes. And so you'll see so many people bringing into their lives, in just every little, in little movements. My mother-in-law, she will lay down and put her feet up the wall just so that she can get some of like her, some of the fluid that's in her like feet, down and around and moving that, so it's like brought into their lives, I think, in a really nice way because we don't all have like a full hour to practice like yoga at a yoga studio. I know every single day, and I love it. It's one of my favorite things on earth. And I still literally don't have the time to like go to a full a class, but you don't have to. And I think, and I talk about this in the grimoire in my workbook, like we have this idea sometimes of all or nothing thinking, right? Like, oh, well, if I can't practice for like a full hour, then I just not going to do it, and that I think it contributes to some of our unhealthy choices because we're like, well, I just want to do my yoga today. And for me, I'm like, no, you don't have to do a full hour of practice. You can do a few minutes while you're standing in line. You can do a few minutes, and that is awesome. That is a good, healthy choice. And you will move incrementally toward your health goals, or you'll just find yourself in a better place where you are now. And that's a really successful thing, too.
Yeah, definitely. And as we finish up our time together, Julia, I always ask my guests if there's something they could heal or change in the world, what would it be? I know it's just one thing, it's tricky.
Oh man, there's so much going on, and here in the States, we've got a lot going on. Not to get into our politics, but there's a lot going on. So to me, what I would love to change is I would love for people to really listen to each other. I think so many times we talk, but we're not really listening, right? We're trying to prove a point, or we're trying to change someone's mind, or we're trying to, just wait till we talk, and I would love for people to really listen to each other and to understand each other empathetically. And I think if we could do that, we could solve a lot of the disagreements that we have, and I think the world would be a lot better place if we just listened to each other a bit better.
It's so funny because keeps coming up in my field at the moment, and it's about this person said to do that, because often we hear people about listening, but how do you actually do that, right? And they suggested that when someone's talking, you actually repeat back in your head what they're saying, and then also write down a few key dot points. So then you're not going into the how do I reply, how do I reply, how do I reply. Instead, you're saying present in the conversation, so you can actually listen. And then the next step under that is to have the deeper listening, where you're actually listening for the meaning under all the words, right? So it can be the next kind of point there. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good tip. I love that. And I've read articles where they're like, how to act like you're listening. And I'm like, don't just act, like,
do.
actually listen, actively listen, and ask questions and be curious. And I think that's so important. And I think if we could, and I'm not the greatest at it either. I'm always like, oh, what should I say next? Oh no, what is she thinking of me? Oh no, what's going on? So I think if we can calm down and really focus on the other person, it helps us get out of our heads too. So I'm with you. That's so cool. That's a great tip.
Yeah. I know, I was like, she just summarized it, this speaker, so beautifully. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so simple. I can do that. And anybody can do that, right? And how do people find you, Julia?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Healthy Witch Wellness. And then my website too, healthywitchwellness.com. The Grimoire will be coming out actually within the next week or two. And so I know, I'm so excited. And that will be on Amazon and a couple of other places. But you can always go to my website. And, if you're curious about witchcraft, you could always take the quiz on my site to find out what kind of witch you are, because there are all sorts of different kinds of witches, which I think is so fun. I once saw a list of 42 different witches, from kitchen witches to, like green witches to garden witches. I call myself a book witch because I love studying and I love the written word, so you can kind of take my quiz and have fun with that, and go to my website for recipes and spell jars and how to do things like that. And feel free to message me, and especially, if you're in the recovery community or curious about recovery, looking for resources for people who may not have a traditional spiritual mindset, I'm happy to direct you to resources in recovery related situations. So please feel free to message me if you need some help, and I'll direct you to the people who can really help.
Perfect, Julia. And I'll make sure I'll put all those notes in the show notes as well. And by the time this show comes out, her book will be on the shelves. So I'll make sure I include the link as well, so that you can go instantly purchase it off Amazon and connect with some witchy wisdom, which I love. So thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your energy. Thanks, Julia.
It's so nice talking to you. Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.